On this Friday night, commitment and cooperation. Strengthening ties between Canada and NATO in the face of potential threats.
What happens here matters not only for Canada, it matters for the whole alliance.
New revelations and explanations in the Trump search affidavit. Why the FBI wanted to scour his Florida home and what's still a secret. The Canadian Screen Awards goes gender neutral. The concerns about inclusion leading to exclusion, and highlighting an issue with many shades of gray.
It's a very controversial territory.
The gamble brands are taking to fire back at misogyny and ageism.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Canada's Arctic is in the strategic spotlight tonight as NATO's chief caps off an historic three-day visit to the region, underlining its tactical importance to the alliance. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg toured Four Wing Cold Lake in northern Alberta after visiting a radar warning station in Nunavut on Thursday. The visit, a show of solidarity as Canada and its allies seek to fortify the far north and counter an increasingly hostile Russia, wielding a new generation of weapons.
Russia is an increasing concern to all of us, makes it timely for us to share with the Secretary General and with NATO all the things that Canada is doing through NORAD, but also independently to make sure that we're protecting this region.
Russia has set up a new Arctic command. It has opened hundreds of new and former Soviet-era Arctic military sites, and also using the high north as a test bed for their most advanced weapons, including hypersonic missiles.
Stoltenberg and Trudeau took direct aim at the Russian president's invasion of Ukraine and the challenges exacerbated by climate change for shifting the geopolitical climate, and as Eric Sorensen reports, accelerating Arctic security concerns.
It is called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but it now sees the Arctic as a new front on the geopolitical map. For decades, Canada has partnered with the United States through NORAD to guard the North. But the visit this week by NATO's Secretary General is a clear, if informal, sign that the alliance is a partner too.
What happens here matters not only for Canada, it matters for the whole alliance.
There is no deep shift in Canadian policy. We are proud members of NATO. We will continue to work with NATO in everything we do.
Why now? Climate change is making the once frozen Arctic much more accessible to friend and foe alike. And Russia's war in Ukraine has crystallized the threat that Russia now poses with hypersonic weapons for which Canada must modernize its defenses.
To ensure that we're not setting ourselves up to deal with historic threats, but really making sure that we're working with our allies to be able to deal with emerging threats.
With Sweden and Finland joining NATO, 7 of the 8 Arctic countries in the world are now with the alliance. The 8th is Russia. And Canada's location is crucial, directly across the Arctic Ocean from where Russia is expanding its northern military capabilities. Plus, China is extending its reach into the Arctic, escalating security concerns for NATO.
Beijing and Moscow have also pledged to intensify practical cooperation in the Arctic. This forms part of the deepening strategic partnership that challenge our values and our interests.
Stoltenberg did not address that Canada falls short of spending 2% of GDP on defence, as NATO members have agreed to do. The billions that Canada has committed will take time to upgrade maritime and air defences, including new F-35 jet fighters that are at least 3 to 5 years away from being delivered. The goal ultimately is deterrence.
Have the ability to convince the Russians not to do it in the first place. And the only way you're going to do that is by demonstrating that you can detect them and that you can respond to them.
As this country deepens its ties with NATO, expectations for Canada's military readiness in the Arctic will also grow. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
We're getting our first look at the documents used to authorize the FBI's search of Donald Trump's Florida home. The U.S. Justice Department unsealed the affidavit today, and it was heavily redacted, but it did hint at serious evidence the former president took highly classified documents from the White House. Our Washington Bureau Chief Jackson Proskow now with what else we learned.
The search of Donald Trump's home was prompted by deep concern about what documents the former president was holding on to. The unsealed affidavit redacts specific details used to authorize the search. The FBI argued there was probable cause to believe classified national defense information was being kept at Mar-a-Lago, along with evidence of obstruction of justice.
It seems unlikely that any judge would have issued a warrant for a former president's home if it hadn't been a very strong case.
The investigation began after a referral from the National Archives. The affidavit explains the 15 boxes of documents Trump returned to the archives in January contained 184 classified documents, 25 marked as top secret, including material that could reveal U.S. intelligence sources. Officials were alarmed because the sensitive material was casually mixed in with newspapers, photos, and miscellaneous items from Trump's presidency. Yet the Justice Department believed there was still more classified and national defense information scattered throughout Mar-a-Lago, including in Trump's office and residence. The August 8th search ultimately recovered another 20 boxes, including multiple sets of highly classified documents, a potentially significant breach of national security.
We'll let the Justice Department determine that. We'll see what happens.
In a memo explaining its reasons for redacting so much information, the Justice Department warned of risks to a significant number of civilian witnesses, with concern Trump or his allies might take steps to interfere in the investigation. Still unknown why the former president held on to documents he had repeatedly been asked to return. Trump is now personally attacking the judge who authorized the search warrant as he complains about the extensive redactions to the affidavit. Part of the reason why the FBI says it wants so much kept secret is that it says it's still trying to locate potential criminal conspirators in this case as it searches for outstanding evidence. Farah?
Jackson Proskow in Washington. Thank you, Jackson. And U.S. prosecutors are seeking formal authorization to offer a plea deal to a Quebec woman accused of mailing poison to Donald Trump. A draft plea agreement has been discussed with Pascal Ferrier's lawyers. It would address 3 charges she faces in Washington and 16 charges in Texas. Ferrier is currently being detained in a Washington area jail. Officers swarmed her apartment in 2020 after she was accused of mailing envelopes containing ricin to the White House and several Texas law officials. Ferrier is scheduled to be back in court on Sunday. A new cache of documents obtained by Global News is shedding light into how the Canadian Armed Forces grappled with reports of its members taking part in February's so-called Freedom Convoy. Emails detail concerns over the involvement of some of Canada's most elite military members, with senior officials choosing to launch an investigation into the matter. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson is following this developing story for us.
JTF-2 is Canada's elite counter-terrorism unit, tasked with missions of the utmost national importance, including the targeted killing of high-profile individuals deemed to be terrorists and performing hostage rescues. When senior members of the military discovered at least 3 members of the ultra-secretive unit were participating in or supporting the convoy, they launched an investigation. Documents obtained by Global News show the military was aware that members of the unit were involved and expected the story to snowball in the media. 2 members of JTF-2 participated in the protest and appear on social media condemning vaccine mandates. Global News has learned that a JTF-2 officer was also transferred out of the unit after it was discovered he had donated to the convoy financially online. Sources say the 2 members who participated in the protest have since been released from the military. In February, Major General Steve Boivin, the commander of the Canadian Special Operations Forces, told Global News, "If the allegations are accurate, this is wrong, and it goes against Canadian Armed Forces values and ethics. CANSOFCOM does not condone its members supporting and or actively taking part in causes that jeopardize the apolitical imperative associated with their functions. Members of JTF-2 are not allowed to participate in political demonstrations or espouse anti-government messages because they must be prepared to respond to any order the government of the day gives." And sources say that could have included a response response to the protest if national security threats had materialized. Now, CANSOFCOM is refusing to comment on why the two members were released or disclose the findings of the investigations. In a statement, the command says, upon learning of allegations that members of the Canadian Special Operation Forces Command supported the freedom protests in Ottawa, investigations were initiated. The results of the investigation will not be further discussed in order to respect the privacy of the former Canadian Armed Forces members. The pandemic put tremendous stress on JTF2, like it did on so much of Canadian society. And more than a dozen sources with direct knowledge of the unit say that the two men in question who have since left the military were highly decorated, had excellent service records, and one was even involved in that historic longest sniper shot in Iraq. But things changed when the vaccine mandates came in, and it created significant social splits in the unit, which have created questions about culture and operational effectiveness, both of which many of the operators in that unit say the command needs to address. Farah?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thank you, Mercedes. A group of volunteer scientists and public health experts that have been advising the Ontario government on its COVID-19 response will soon be dissolved. The Ontario Science Table was told by the province's public health agency that its services would no longer be needed by September 6th. Now, this news comes after the resignation of the group's longtime co-chair, Dr. Steiny Brown. In a statement, the table's scientific advisor wrote the pandemic will remain a daunting challenge for the foreseeable future and hopes the principles the table was based on will live on in some form. Two household names from the pandemic are now embroiled in a lawsuit. Moderna is suing Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech for patent infringement. Moderna alleges Pfizer copied technology that was developed years before the pandemic to develop the first COVID-19 vaccine. In 2020, Moderna said it would not enforce its COVID-19 related patents while the pandemic continued. Then, this past March, with vaccine supplies improving globally, it said it would update that pledge. Now, it's not clear what damages Moderna is seeking. The lawsuit has been filed in both U.S. federal court and in German court. The concerns around Europe's largest nuclear power plant. Coming up, why some experts say the danger is being overblown. Plus, fears of what's in the forecast for rain-ravaged Pakistan. Europe's largest nuclear power facility is back online today after temporarily being disconnected from the power grid amid ongoing shelling near the Zaporizhzhia plant. Ukrainian officials are now reportedly handing out iodine tablets to local residents as fears grow over a potential nuclear incident in the region. But as Redmond Shannon reports, some experts are taming those concerns and suggesting things at the plant aren't as grave as they're being made out to be.
Ukraine says Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has now been reconnected to the grid after these fires, which it says were caused by Russian shelling, took it offline on Thursday. President Volodymyr Zelensky said it had risked a global radiation disaster, but nuclear experts say that is an exaggeration.
All this is kind of a fear-mongering, and both sides need the electricity. So that's the reason that the plant is still there and operating, and they will need electricity, hopefully also in the future.
Nuclear engineer Professor Leon Ciezel says there are multiple backup systems during a disconnect. And even in the event of a meltdown, this type of power plant would only affect a 20 to 40 kilometre radius. On Friday, Russia said it took out a Ukrainian howitzer gun that was targeting the plant, the same model that was supplied by Canada. Both sides have accused the other of shelling. It's difficult to verify any of those accusations, but last month Ukraine released video of an airstrike against Russian forces just 300 metres from the reactors. The proposed visit from independent inspectors would need all violence to stop.
Kyiv accepts it, Moscow accepts it. We need to go, and we are going to be there, hopefully very, very soon.
One former nuclear inspector told Global News the terms of that visit will decide what the world might learn.
The hosts are going to take them to see what it is they want them to see. It'll be interesting whether the Ukrainian people who are running the plant will be allowed to interact with the IAEA and show them what they want to show.
Yet, no matter how low the risk may be to the wider world, It's little comfort to those who live close to Europe's largest nuclear power plant. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
As the war drags into its 7th month, its effects continue to be felt across Europe. The UK's energy regulator says households can expect their annual bill to increase by 80% in October, in part due to a reduced supply of Russian gas. The latest hike will almost triple what households were paying last October. There are calls for the government to do more as fears grow of an unaffordability crisis in a nation that's experiencing its steepest inflation rates since the 80s. It comes as analysts say Russia's state-controlled energy giant Gazprom is burning off an estimated $10 million of natural gas a day, adding to both environmental and energy concerns in the region. And Pakistan has declared a national emergency after a devastating monsoon season. Record rainfall has triggered flash floods across more than half of the country. Pakistan's National Disaster Management Authority says 943 people have died since June, including 343 children. The floods have also left more than 30 million people without shelter. Pakistan's Minister for Climate Change says the country is going through its 8th cycle of monsoon, more than twice the normal amount. Data suggests there could be another cycle in September. Ahead, going neutral, why the Canadian Screen Awards is doing away with some prominent categories.
You're watching Global National.
There are some big changes underway for one of Canada's most prestigious events, recognizing top talent in film, television, and digital media. Next year, the Canadian Screen Awards will drop gender-based categories, so no more Best Actor or Actress, just Best Performance. Until now, some trans and non-binary actors have been shut out of contention. But as Dan Spector reports, some advocates say there's still a long way to go.
And now the nominees for Best Lead Actor Comedy.
It is our pleasure to present Best Performance by an Actress.
Phrases you will not hear at the 2023 Canadian Screen Awards, Canada's version of the Oscars and Emmys. The Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television has decided its awards for excellence in acting in movies and TV will be gender neutral for the first time starting in 2023. The CEO says it's all about being more inclusive.
When we talked this through with different stakeholders, we felt like this was the right move to move towards inclusion.
Young kids.
Actor Marissa McDonald doesn't identify as male or female, and they say the move was long overdue.
I was so excited for not just myself and my community, but the future of the generations to come after me to see themselves reflected authentically.
Both McDonald and Emmy winner Jovan Nicola appreciate the gesture, but the two are among several actors with major concerns. For one, there are now fewer awards to win. Instead of 5 nominees for each gender in each category, there are now 8 in total.
I don't think that's fair to women, actually, and or to LGBTQ, non-binary and trans people, because the reality is that it's not an equal playing field in the industry.
The actors wish the Academy would have just added more categories, giving more people a chance to shine in an industry where it's difficult to climb the ladder.
You know, best male performance, best female performance, best non-binary performance, best transgender performance.
This is very important to gig workers. This is part of the opportunities we have to put on our resume, to build our career.
The national president of ACTRA says another major issue is that writers and producers are still not creating enough roles for marginalized people.
It's just not there yet.
I feel like we only change the culture by expanding the kinds of stories we tell and by creating better opportunities and more visibility for people in the LGBTQ community.
The Academy says it's open to adding categories in the future and hopes the move illustrates that people from all backgrounds are welcome in the industry. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Next, marketing gray zone. Should brands jump on hot-button social issues? To die or not to die? For so many women and men around the world, it's taken the pandemic to ditch the hair dye and finally embrace the gray hair. They say it's energizing and empowering, but after Bell Media's recent dismissal of respected Canadian journalist Lisa Laflamme, some big brands are firing back. Tonight, Karen Lieberman looks at the campaigns calling out sexism and ageism and speaks to women who've gone back to their roots and are showing their true colors.
And I just noticed that beautiful streak right there. And I love that streak.
As Stephanie George approached age 50, she made a choice.
It just wasn't worth the time anymore to cover up the root. I'm happy to show my grays.
This week, fast food chain Wendy's Canada swapped its mascot's recognizable red-haired pigtails for gray ones, tweeting, "Because a star is a star regardless of hair color." One of the latest brands to back former CTV news anchor Lisa LaFlamme, whose dismissal by Bell Media raised questions about sexism and ageism. Throughout the pandemic, gray hair has made headlines in many top publications, with The New Yorker calling the phenomenon silver linings, and others suggesting ditch the dye. At this Toronto hair salon, there's been a notable increase in the number of clients embracing their gray.
By the time that 7-8 months that we were closed and nobody get a chance to color their hair, their roots were out and they actually see how beautiful their gray was.
Same in Hollywood and on red carpets.
While social media response to recent marketing campaigns has been mostly positive, some experts warn the move can be risky for certain brands.
Dove maybe a little more, because they have done some work in the past with women's issues. Wendy's, I'm not so sure they have the authority to do that. It's a very controversial territory when brands start to jump in on social issues.
When hot button issues don't align with a brand's focus.
Where brands get into trouble sometimes is they try and show up in a conversation in a way that seems a little bit opportunistic, because deep down it's not really who they are.
Stephanie George would like to see more support for aging women who show their true color, not just when it's convenient.
The whole patriarchal system of our society where men can go gray and it's distinguished and women go gray and they just look old, it's hogwash.
Karen Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
Well, that's Global National for this Friday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your Friday evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is Okanagan Lake in Penticton, British Columbia. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep emailing us those photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Tracy Tong will be with you on the Anchor Desk tomorrow. Until Monday, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a restful weekend. Good night.